And so here's what I want to talk to you about. One of the things that I realize is regardless of where you are right now in your life, that chances are you've had to deal with a loss. And unfortunately, guess what? We all have to deal with losses in life. That even if you consider yourself to be a winner, somewhere along the line, life is going to deal you a loss. And so I don't know what kind of losses you've experienced lately. Maybe perhaps you know what it's like to lose a job. Maybe you know what it's like to lose a loved one. Maybe you know what it's like to lose money financially. Maybe you made an investment and things didn't quite turn out the way that you want. Maybe you lost a friendship, somebody that you thought was going to be your friend forever. And unfortunately, something happened that severed the relationship that caused you all to have to go your separate ways. I don't know what it is that you've experienced, what kind of loss that you've had, or perhaps what kind of failure or setback that you've had. But I can tell you this, that we have to be very careful on how we process those losses. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes you can experience a loss and you can allow yourself to begin to beat yourself up. You can experience a loss and you can allow yourself to start entering a state of depression. You can experience a loss and you can begin to look at yourself as if you are some type of a failure. And so I bring that up to make you realize this is, I have yet till this point in my life to meet somebody who has experienced some significant success, that when I've had a one-on-one conversation with them, that journey to having success did not consist of many losses along the way. And so if you're a note taker, I want you to write this down, and it's something I want you to take to heart. See, here's what I need you to realize. When you lose, don't lose the lesson. Write that down right now. I want you to write that down. And if you're driving, keep your hand on the steering wheel. Just go ahead and commit it to memory, and you can write it down a little later. But here's what I want you to know. When you lose, don't lose the lesson. And so the reason why I say that is because most of us who have accomplished any level of success, and for those of you who have accomplished any level of success, what you'll realize is that oftentimes many of the success that you've accomplished in your life that you were able to draw from, that you were able to glean from some of your past experiences. And some of those past experiences consisted of losses. They consisted of opportunities that you pursued that didn't quite work out the way that you intended. And so you had to go back to the drawing board, and you were able to pull some lessons that you learned from the first time that you attempted to market or promote your particular product or market and promote your business. Finally, when you had the successful business, you're able to draw from those businesses that failed, those businesses that you incurred losses on. Finally, when you found a way to have a successful relationship, you're able to draw from the lessons that you drew from all the previous relationships that maybe went sour, those previous relationships that didn't quite work out the way that you thought that they would. You see, what I'm saying is oftentimes, once you get to a place in which you're experiencing some level of success, if you would take the moment to realize this, that oftentimes in those moments of success, what really prepared you to be able to succeed in the relationship, prepared you to succeed in the business, prepared you to succeed in this particular stage or phase in your life, were all the lessons that you were able to draw from all your previous setbacks and obstacles and failures. And so we've got to remember that so that we don't begin to beat ourselves up. We have to remember that so that we can pull back and we can draw from some of those past experiences. And so what I'm saying to you is this: if maybe perhaps you've experienced a loss recently or even in the past, and you haven't been able to get past it, and you keep continuing to beat yourself up, and maybe you can relate, and I tell you, I could definitely relate. I can remember, one of the moments in my life when, I was, really thinking that, I was going to be this extraordinary entrepreneur. And I remember making a very significant investment. I had saved up some money, and I took all of my savings, and I decided to take part in this real estate project. And unfortunately, this real estate project completely went south. I mean, this thing did not work out by any stretch of the imagination. And I can remember that moment when I realized that I had lost all my savings. That moment when I realized that I made a poor decision on who I decided to partner up with in this business opportunity. That moment that I realized that I should have done a little more due diligence. That moment when I realized that I was not getting any of that money back. I can tell you that I can remember literally closing myself in my bedroom and laying on my bed and literally having a pity party. And so there's all type of thoughts that were going on in my mind. And I was saying to myself, I would say, Andy, how could you be so stupid? How could you decide to actually trust this person? Why did you decide to actually go into business with this person? Why didn't you decide to do a little more due diligence? Why didn't you do some extra additional paperwork? Yeah, you signed the contract, but why didn't you do some additional things to be able to protect yourself? And I found myself just focusing on all the things that didn't quite work out in that moment. And so one of the things that I've discovered is whatever you focus on the longest becomes the strongest. In other words, whatever you choose to focus on begins to magnify, begins to grow. And so once you begin to have a pity party, once you look back at that loss and you focus on everything that went wrong, and you focus on the fact that that person betrayed you, that person that maybe perhaps lied to you, the fact that you got let go from the job, the fact that you put all your money into the business and didn't work out, the fact that you wrote a big check to that investor, and unfortunately you didn't get the return that you were anticipating. But what happens is you can sit there and begin to replay everything that went wrong. And when you do that, unfortunately, it doesn't serve you. When you do that, unfortunately, you don't move forward. And it's easy to get into a place in which you decide at that moment to begin to label yourself, and you begin to label yourself as a failure. And so for about a week or two, I found myself really beginning to label myself as a failure, because I was focusing on all the things that didn't quite work out the way that I anticipated. Maybe you could relate to that. I don't know if you can think of a time that you experienced a loss that maybe you didn't do a very good job of processing that loss. And so you began to beat yourself up. And that's really what I began to do. And because of that, it really caused my self-esteem in that moment to go down. And I began to isolate myself because I didn't want to have to relive that situation. I didn't really want to have to share how I made a poor decision. But then what I tell you is where the things begin to turn around is when I decided to start looking at that particular situation differently. And I started to think to myself, yes, Andy, yes, you made a poor decision. Yes, that particular investment was an absolute failure. However, you are not a failure. And that's one of the things I've got to say for some of you who maybe perhaps you've experienced a failure. Realize this, that failure is an event. If you're a note taker, write that down. Failure is an event. It's not who you are. Write that down. Failure is an event. It is not who you are. And so all too often we experience an event that was a bit of a failure, but instead of just realizing and trying to process the event, we label ourselves as a failure. And so realize this, that event itself was a failure, but you are not a failure. And the way that you're able to move forward and have success is if you can just simply look back at that particular situation, that particular event, and say to yourself, what are the lessons that I can gain from this? What can I pull away from this particular experience? And when I look back at my experience, when I look back, what I realized in that moment is that, first of all, I had made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And so I learned very early on that as an entrepreneur, that you are going to experience some losses. And when you experience those losses, what I also discovered is you are faced with a decision. And the decision that you have to make is whether or not you're going to choose to become bitter or whether or not you're going to choose to become better. Whether or not that you're going to allow yourself to just stay stuck and become paralyzed in the story, or if you're going to find a way to stand on top of this situation to be able to prepare and be able to see at a different level so that you can get to the next level. And so as I look back at that situation, sure, I realized that there's some things that I should have done differently, some things that made me a better businessman, some things that I've learned to sort of protect myself when I'm going into a business venture. And so when I also look back, I realized that, you know what, here's what I also realized is that there's no guarantees in life. That when you decide to take a chance on your goals, when you decide to take a chance on your dreams, when you decide to take a chance on an investment, guess what? There's a possibility that things may not work out. And if they don't work out, guess what? It's okay. You've got to learn to keep pushing forward. And so what I'm saying to you is that once I began to stop focusing on all the things that went bad, and I began to focus on what were the lessons here? What are the lessons here, Andy? The lessons are if you're going into business, then you need to do some due diligence. The lesson is that sometimes things, even no matter you do all the due diligence in the world, sometimes things aren't going to quite work out. The lesson is when you're going through hell, as Winston Churchill said, Keep going. The lesson is life really is only about 10% what happens to you. The other 90% is how you respond. The lesson is what L.C. Robinson said, that things may happen around you and things may happen to you, but the only things that matter are the things that happen in you. And so I had to make a decision that, wait a second, Andy, this was just simply one event. Now you've got to find a way to draw the lesson. And now you can pull the lesson to prepare you for the next stage. And so I want you to look back at some of your past losses. And I don't want you to beat yourself up like we customarily do, but rather I want you to think for a moment and say, wait a second, what's the lesson here? What is it that I can actually learn? You know, here's what Henry Ford said. Henry Ford said that failure is an opportunity to start again, but this time with a little more intelligence, this time with a little more intel, this time with a little more knowledge. And what he means by that is when we fail, we have an opportunity to start over again. But when we start over again, we're not the same person if we simply can look back at the failure and draw the lessons. And if you think about people who have breakthrough success, if you were to really learn about their stories, you would discover that along their journey that they experienced so many failures and setbacks along the way. And each setback and each failure, they pulled something from it. And so I want you to start looking at your losses a little differently. I want you to start thinking about, how is it that I can glean from this? How can I pull from this experience? What is it that I failed to do in that particular situation? How did I not show up? How can I take full responsibility and accountability for my actions? How can I stop pointing the finger? Because every time I'm pointing the finger at somebody else, I've got three fingers pointing back at me. What is it that I can do that's going to equip me for this next stage that's in my life? And so I want you to start thinking about that, because really at the end of the day, the only way that you're going to get to the next level is if you learn how to handle and deal with your pains and your failures and your setbacks and your experiences. You know, and sometimes it doesn't have to be something catastrophic. Sometimes it could just be something real simple. You know, I tell you, another lesson that I learned, and this was a couple years back, you know, there's this particular organization, this nonprofit organization that I was putting in a proposal to be able to come in and conduct a training, a storytelling training, and train their entire staff. And so naturally, a nonprofit organization has to get out there in the marketplace. And of course, one of the major things that they have to do is to be able to raise money. And so one of the things that I assist nonprofit organizations with is, instead of them leading with the mission statement and facts and figures like they typically do, I come in and I train their staff members on how to leverage and use the stories of the people that their nonprofit organization is impacting, and how to leverage and use those stories so that they can share those stories and trigger the potential donors at an emotional level to inspire them to contribute to their organization. And so this particular person I was talking to said, hey, Andy, listen, here's what I want you to do. You know, I want you to go ahead and give us a proposal. And so I remember, you know, going on their website and learning the ins and out about this organization, finding about all their different programs, finding about, you know, all the impact that they're making, actually capturing some of the stories that they have, putting together this beautiful, extensive presentation of me coming in and just doing this training for their entire staff. And then I remember actually submitting this proposal to this woman and then doing a follow-up with her. So I did a follow-up, and during the follow-up, she said, hey, you know what? That's excellent, Andy. Why don't we go ahead and meet one-on-one? I said, that sounds phenomenal. Hey, I said, let's go ahead and have lunch. So she decided to come with me to lunch, and somebody else. And of course, I treated them to lunch. I went through the proposal and broke everything down. And so I followed up a week or two later. And after following up a week or two later, I said to her, I said, well, listen, you know, I'm just following up. You know, we met up, and you sounded like, you know, everything made sense to you. And so, you know, are we ready to move forward and so forth? And then she says to me, well, you know what? Actually, the person who can make the decision on that is no longer with the company. And I was like, wait a second. You had me submit a proposal to you. You and I met up for lunch. I went through this entire proposal. We've been going back and forth, and you're not the decision maker. And let me just tell you, I felt deflated at the moment, and I felt so frustrated. And for me, that ended up being a pretty significant loss of my time. But let me tell you something. When I look back at that situation, when I look back at that experience, it wasn't completely a loss because I got the lesson. And what I discovered in my business, the way it operates in my business, especially when it's time for me to be able to do a proposal, or if I'm potentially going to be coming in to maybe do a keynote presentation or a training, I've learned now very early on in the conversation when I'm speaking to somebody who's considering using my services to find out up front who is the decision maker. And so I learned a valuable lesson. When you are looking to do a proposal or when you're looking to get the business, to make the ask, make the offer, you need to make sure that you're speaking to the final decision maker. Now, here's something else that I learned and I discovered from that experience is this, and this is something I want you to write down, that you got to make sure that you never, ever accept a no from someone who's not even authorized to give you a yes. Write that down. Trust me, it's powerful. Write it down. Never accept a no from someone who's not authorized to give you a yes. And so that's another lesson I learned in life. You see, here's what I realized, that oftentimes we allow somebody to say no to our goals and our dreams. We allow somebody to say no to this vision that we have in our lives. We allow somebody to say no to the loan. We allow somebody to say no to the job opportunity. We allow somebody to say no to this major project that we're trying to push forward. But realize this, that oftentimes the person that you're accepting the no from, the person that you're allowing to kill your dream, the person that you're allowing to poke holes into your situation in your dream, that person wasn't even authorized in the first place to say yes to your goals and your dreams. That person does not hold the final ticket to making your dreams become a reality. And so one of the things that we have to be intentional about is making sure that, number one, we're speaking to the final decision maker and that we don't allow somebody to tell us no who wasn't authorized in the first place to give us a yes. And so what I've learned is as I go through my personal journey is that when I encounter things that feel as if they're a loss, really they're not a loss. What they really are is they're lessons. And oftentimes in every failure, in every loss, there's in there a powerful, significant opportunity, or there's in there a powerful lesson that you can pull from that's going to prepare you for the next opportunity. That's going to prepare you to take advantage of the next thing that is going to come your way. And so I want to remind you one more time, when you lose, don't lose the lesson. And so, another thing is coming to me right now as I'm sharing that story with you. I experienced another significant loss. And what happened is, I was really blessed and fortunate. Some of you know, as a matter of fact, I shared this. I had the opportunity to go back to my alma mater, and I graduated with my undergrad and my master's degree from Florida State University. And it was pretty exciting, pretty awesome that I had an opportunity to go back and actually deliver the keynote commencement speech for the College of Business Master's program at Florida State University. And so this is the same master's program that I graduated from. This is the same program that I remember sitting down with my cap and gown and seeing someone deliver that commencement talk, and always wondering if maybe possibly that could be me one day. And so it was a special experience for me to go back and be able to do that. And so during the time that I was there at Florida State University, I was so blessed and fortunate. I had some pretty good grades, and I was able to graduate basically with no student loans. I mean, really, really fortunate and blessed. And so after graduating from college, I was dating somebody who made a decision that they wanted to continue on with their college education. And so this particular individual, she needed to get a private student loan. And unfortunately, she didn't qualify for this student loan on her own. And so she asked me if there's any way that I would be willing to co-sign on the student loan. Now, for anybody who knows me, that is not something that I would normally do, right? I seldom make decisions based off of emotion. And that is typically something that if I were to get that request, that immediately I would say no, because, anybody with wisdom knows that it's not a very good decision to go ahead and co-sign for somebody. But something happened. I don't know if I operated out of guilt or whatever, and I decided to co-sign on the student loan. And when we co-signed on the student loan, it was with the understanding that the portion of that private student loan that she was using for her program that she was continuing with education, that as soon as she was gainfully employed, that she was going to begin to make those payments back. Well, lo and behold, I co-signed on the student loan. She completed the program, and she ended up getting a phenomenal job right out of school, making close to 6 figures. And as you know it, unfortunately, guess what? Things didn't work out in the relationship. And following that, guess what happened? Yeah, you guessed it. She decided that she's no longer going to make the student payments. Now, here's what I need you to realize. Every single month, I'm realizing that I have to make a student loan payment. And a portion of the debt of that student loan payment has nothing to do with me and had to do with somebody else's schooling. And so you can imagine every single month when I have to make that payment, I am absolutely furious. And so I can remember literally the way it would work every time I had to make that payment. First of all, I would start pacing back and forth. And then I'd start picking up the phone and I'd start speaking to somebody and say, can you believe I got to make this student loan payment again? And I remember I'd get so upset and so frustrated that all of a sudden my hand would begin to start twitching. All of a sudden I would feel a headache coming through my head because my blood pressure would begin to rise. I'd go in the mirror and my eyes would begin to literally start turning like bloodshot red. And then I would literally just make the payment and I would be furious. And for the rest of the day, my day would be messed up because all I kept thinking about is how could this happen? How could I co-sign for somebody else? And how could she be okay with allowing me to go ahead and pay? And I would be frustrated and upset. And for the longest, I was placing all the blame and all the focus on her. And when I did that, guess what? There was no growth. When I did that, guess what? Nothing was happening in my life significant that I was able to glean and draw from. And when I did that, guess what? That loan wasn't going anywhere. It was there month after month and week after week. And so it wasn't until I decided to pull for a second and say, wait a second, Andy, what's the lesson here? What is it that you can learn from this experience? And one of the things, of course, that I learned up front, which is needless to say, and I would tell all of you, do not co-sign for anybody. You hear me on that? Listen, that is some biblical wisdom. Do not co-sign for anybody, period. Don't do it, all right? That's the first thing I would tell you. But then I say, Andy, what's the other lesson here? And so what I realized is when I look back at the situation, I realized, I said, you know what? She simply asked me to co-sign. She didn't hold a gun to my head. She didn't force me to do it. She didn't say I have to do it. I, on my own accord, decided to actually co-sign. And when you co-sign, ladies and gentlemen, when you co-sign on something, what you're simply saying is this, that if this person does not pay, and the creditor has already determined that it's likely that the person will not pay, and that's why they ask the person to get a cosign. And so if the person does not pay, like the creditor has already determined that they're likely not to pay, then you are going to go ahead and step in and actually pay this debt on their behalf. And so what I realized is that, you know what, Andy, you can place all the blame you want on her, but at the end of the day, you've got to take full ownership of this. And the moment I decide to take full ownership of it, the moment I no longer place the blame on her, you see, I had the ability now to decide to come up with a game plan to start aggressively paying off that student loan. And so what I realized is this, you know what? Until you begin to own something, until you decide to take full ownership of something, no matter what somebody did, no matter what your boss did, no matter what your sibling did, no matter what your friend did, no matter what the economy did, as soon as you decide to take full ownership of it, that's the moment that now you have control. That's the moment that now you can start changing things and make them turn around in your favor. And so what I realized, once again, wait a second, Andy, here's something that you believe was a significant loss, but there is a very powerful, profound lesson in there for you. And so what I want you to realize is this, that there's some losses that you've incurred. There's some past setbacks, some disappointments, some failures that you've experienced, that you are beating yourself up, that you're beginning to replay in your mind. And what I want to share with you is that there is a breakthrough that is waiting for you, that you are going to go to the next level. But before you can get to the next level, you got to be able to draw from the lessons that you can pull from those past failures, from those past disappointments. And what I want you to start remembering is when you lose, don't lose the lesson. And so it's not really failure, ladies and gentlemen. There's some feedback in there. And what we have to do is we have to learn back to go back and examine our failures, examine our losses, and pull out the treasures, pull out the lessons, and use those lessons and use those treasures so that we can get to the next level. And so I know right now, if you're anything like me and you're going after your goals and your dreams, and you're making some things happen, that there's chances that you will experience some losses. As a matter of fact, the only people who don't experience losses are the people who are hiding out, the people who aren't going after their goals and their dreams, the people who are seriously not serious. But if you're serious about your goals and your dreams, if you're committed to showing up, if you're committed to going to the next level, you're going to experience some losses. And when you lose, don't lose the lesson. You know, this wouldn't be Andy Henriquez if I didn't end by telling you this. Show up for your lives, ladies and gentlemen, because if you don't, nobody else will. All right. Well, excellent. Well, perfect. Let me tell you, first of all, I am so excited. I just want to thank all of you for being part of the Show Up for Your Life motivational movement. And so I'm going to take care of a couple of housecleaning things, but let me just say this. First of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you who've already ordered your copy of the Show Up for Your Life book. You know what? I've had the opportunity to go on Amazon and read some of the reviews. I have just been absolutely humbled by the reviews. I've been humbled by, the social media posts. People have just taken it upon themselves to put out videos, to put out pictures and so forth, just talking about the tremendous value that they receive from the book. And if you're listening in right now and you haven't gotten a copy of the Show Up for Your Life book, this is something that you want to do right away. I'm telling you, this book is literally going to transform your life. You see, Show Up for Your Life, it is not just a title of a book. It's really a mindset. It's a mindset that I had the privilege of witnessing my mother as I watched this woman who came to the United States with less than $150 to her name, who pursued the American dream, working all kind of odd jobs for over 20 years, who finally was able to open up her restaurant, her little Haitian cuisine, and be in there operating her business, only to see her business, her dream, be jeopardized and be faced with foreclosure, and have the willingness, even though she didn't speak the language, have the willingness, even though she didn't have the resources, to just show up to a foreclosure sale with the sole intent to see if she could maybe just convince whoever got the property if she'd be able to stay. And this woman who was willing to exercise her faith decided to jump in that particular auction, and she won the bid. And for the next 30 days, she would have to find the money, even though she didn't have it. And that day, that particular event, when my mom was able to raise the money, she went from being the tenant to being the landlord. And that single event of my mom showing up, of this woman who barely spoke the language, this woman who came from the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, this woman who at one point was basically sleeping out in a foyer on the outside in Haiti with my grandmother, that woman was willing to show up. And so what I did was I pulled from that story and many other tremendous stories to pull out 7 very powerful principles that we can all draw from that will allow us to transform our lives. Principles like ensuring that we show up, because nothing happens if you're not willing to show up. Principles, the importance of just having a purpose. When my mom decided in that moment to go ahead and go after her goals and her dreams, she had a purpose from the moment she stepped foot here in the United States. She had a purpose to fulfill the American dream, to go after her goals and her dreams. That same woman not only had a purpose, but she also had a compelling reason. She had a why. When my mom was going after her goals and her dreams, let me tell you, there's some difficulty, but she knew she had them 2 little boys, me and my brother Ralph, that she had to take care of. And so she had a compelling reason. She had a why. She had something to draw from. And when we decide to show up, we got to have a compelling why. We got to have a reason, something that we can pull from. And not only that, but the amazing thing about my mom, well, what I love about her story is that she was absolutely unstoppable. And so, you know what, as she went through being here in the United States, she had all kind of reasons to give up on her goals and dreams, all kind of reasons to not even show up to this sale. But my mom just made a decision in her mind that she was going to be absolutely unstoppable. And so unstoppable is one of those principles. The other thing is that my mom, one of the things that I absolutely love when I look back at her story as well, not only was she unstoppable, but she was willing to trust the process. And so success is a process. And so she had to undergo a process. Let me tell you, we live in a society where people are looking for microwave success. They're looking for instant success. And it doesn't work that way. You have to undergo a process. Who you are right now has gotten you as far as you can get right now. And if you want to get to the next level, you're going to have to transform. You're going to have to go through a process. And you're going to have to accept and trust the process so that you can get to that next level, so that you can get to the next place in your life. And not only that, but the beautiful thing is you got to have some level of faith. And the thing I love about my mom is that when she showed up to that sale, she didn't have any intentions on bidding on that property. She didn't know how things were going to work out, but she was willing to raise her hand up and join the bid. She had the faith that, first of all, she was going to win the bid. She had the faith to be able to come up with the money in 30 minutes. And she had the faith to believe that she even belonged there in the first place because she was willing to show up. And so that is just, my mom's story is just one of the stories that is in that particular book. But the principles that I share, I know if you implement these 7 principles, let me tell you something, it'll transform your life. And so what I want you to do right now, this moment, if you haven't already done so, make sure that you get a copy of the Show Up for Your Life book. And here's how you're going to do that. Just simply go to showupforyourlifebook.com. Go to showupforyourlifebook.com. Or if you like shopping on Amazon, you can go to amazon.com and get a copy of the book. If you like shopping on at Barnes & Nobles, you can go to barnesandnobles.com and get a copy of the book. But whatever you do, whether you go to Amazon, whether you go to Barnes & Nobles, whether you decide to go to showupforyourlifebook.com, regardless of where you go, just get a copy of the book. I guarantee you it is going to make a significant impact in your life. It is going to transform your life. And if you have already gotten the book, definitely continue to send me the emails, send me the posts. I love reading those posts. I mean, I feed off of everything all of you have been saying that have been reading the book. I've had people who've been saying that, Andy, listen, I can't remember the last time I read a book from cover to cover. I read your book, or Andy, I was reading your book, and there were several times in there that I literally cried because the story so touched me and I was so inspired. And so I love hearing these stories. And so if you haven't already done so, make sure you get a copy of the book. Now, so you and I can stay connected, go to showupforyourlife.com. When you get there, also, you're going to see a place where you can put in your name and your email address. Put your name and your email address, and that is going to allow me to continue to send you inspirational messages, to send you videos and content that I believe is really going to help to transform your life. Now, with that being said, one of the things that we always do customarily is we open up the